Vamos próximo. Mas ela não está trabalhando aqui, ela está lá na outra sala. Ah, bom, não sei. Eu estou aqui. Eu não sei o que está passando lá. Eu posso começar aqui, porque... Tá, pode, me muta aí, se você não quiser me ouvir. Eu ainda nem comecei. Deixa eu começar aqui. Okay, hello. We are here with Marco Nascimento and Pedro Westphalen. And I and Marco go way back. We have had many discussions on the construction of an industrial policy for our industry. The pandemic has taught us the strategy, and we learned many things, good things and bad things. A few things worked as a catalyzer to accelerate major transformations in our society. One of the things that was very clear and transparent with the pandemic was the frailty and deficiency And now many countries, we stopped our exports of medical devices. And all of this has demonstrated in a very, very transparent way, in a very clear way, the strategic vulnerability of nations that do not look and can see the industrial complex of healthcare as a strategic complex. In Brazil, in 2008, we started building a policy, an industrial health policy for the first time back then, and then that we destroyed in the legislation. And so we used the purchasing power of the state, technology transfer, and we related products and technologies that were important for our unified system in terms of an industrial policy. So after all these years, what we have had was a non-evolution and a deconstruction of what had started to be built. It's a difficult thing to say, but this is the truth. In Brazil, we have destroyed. And believe it or not, last year when ventilators, lung ventilators, were sought after in any and everywhere in the country, these products were in the list of strategic products prepared by the Ministry of Health in the year of 2008. So the debate I want to have with you is, Marco, in our country, is it important for all health thinkers that are here, is it important for our country to adopt a state policy, an industrial state policy for our industry, for the segment of health This is, in our vision, a strategic segment. And then we are going to advance with Pedro. And then we are going to hear, Pedro, how we can build and how we can help build a state policy rather than a government policy. In the opinion of Abimo, in my opinion, this is a mistake that was made. We built a government policy, and in our country, unfortunately, there is still the culture of undo what the other government did, whether good or bad. So without further ado, Marco, please, you have the floor. What is your opinion? What is your vision? What is the vision of Fiocruz about the strategic importance of the health industrial complex? Good afternoon, everyone. Before anything, I would like to thank you for the honor of being here with you, sharing the screen with Franco. So we first met when I was at the Ministry of Health. I am an employee of the Ministry of Health, and I am lent to Osvaldo Cruz. And the first time I share a panel with a congressman. It's a satisfaction and an honor to be here with you. Yes, we can hear Marco. Well, there are some audio glitches, but we can all hear Marco. Well, okay, production. Well, we can hear your dog barking. Hi. Well, even my dog had a special participation. Looks like Franco can't hear anything. Marco, I think you can continue. Yes, I should. Well, he made the introduction, but it's a pleasure to be here with you. The invitation made to Fiocruz. I came here to represent Dr. Gadelha. I am the executive secretary, work together with me, but I'm here because I am very enthusiastic about what the Dr. Gadelha defends, which is Franco's question, whether we believe that the Ministry of Health should be considered strategic tool. The answer is yes. This agenda is being developed at Fiocruz. And this is based on a perception that the support of the Brazilian healthcare system is not related to a material and productive basis that can provide support to the demands of the SUS that is up to it. And this might be the main accomplishment after the redemocratization of Brazil. And oddly, not 100% of its potential is used. It's a privilege to have this written in the Constitution. It's everybody's right, and it's the duty of the state. But it can also be a major opportunity for health to bring back development. So when we talk about the possibility of using health as strategic vector, I think that Franco was very fortunate in his introduction to say that the experience of COVID has been proving to be a lesson, a sad lesson that we have learned, and very loud in terms of the failures and the intersections through which the unified healthcare system has demonstrated to have a few frailties. So Franco's back, he can hear us. So this perception of being faced with the frailties of SUS and the saddest thing of COVID, well, the most tragic aspect, tragedy happens when there will be a bad outcome, and we know that's bad. Well, this was put. The vulnerability of SUS were frequently and constantly indicated, and we've been doing that for many years, and we were not able to deal with them, and we are not at the height of a challenge. It was just a matter of time. It was not as bad as it might be, of course, because SUS is an accomplishment, but it could have been better, definitely. And then the comparison with other countries makes this the finding of this fact even more drastic, because there is a geopolitical tone in what Franco said, and that what he said is true. And I assume that if you are for China, our dependence is greater than just China. So we depend on devices, and we import a lot from the United States, from Germany too. But certainly it is clear that the concentration, and this is clear for many different reasons. One of them is the fact that ventilators had been listed as a strategic product by the Ministry of Health in 2012 or 28. We had the perception that in specific situations, this input, we could be short of it. And so I worry that we are just speaking to everyone. So what is the list of strategic products? This was a list designed by many stakeholders that are the policymakers, which defined which inputs are very important. These are the very important, and we cannot do without them. And then we cannot have any shortage. And shortage was one of the fundamental issues, and the incapacity of the national production system of supplying the unified healthcare system. And the example of ventilators is very lively and very eloquent, because if we think, it doesn't matter where it is made. So you can supply the demand, that's okay. Once the world is pushed to an extreme, there are situations that are no longer usual. And what we saw, and that's a very good finding done by a Swiss university, they call the global market, the global trade alert. And they showed how much market borders were closed as the pandemic advanced. And it advanced from east to west. And as the pandemic got to country, they closed their market border, the trade borders too, got to a point when we had the situation that was very drastic. We had airplanes wouldn't take off, airplanes taking ventilators would not take off, and they would only go to those who pay the most. So you need to have a basis that can be very rapidly redirected. You need to have local synergy in terms of capacity of decentralizing decisions. But this is something that we could have had. So we can't meet the needs. Also, and I'm going to go slightly forward, after a certain while, ventilators were no longer the ideal solution. and only the country that had the production basis that could manufacture ventilators, they were the only ones who could replace that and have an industrial alternative. And also, there were some factories without the dimension or sufficient scale to meet the needs. For example, in England, they have the NHS, and they had a project of monitoring. They brought the manufacturing basis of the country to NHS, and they could respond to the demands of COVID very rapidly once they realized that the success rate of intubated patients on a ventilator was very low, and they replaced based on information provided by the frontline. People who were on the front line treating patients, they adjusted the project so that they could provide faster responses. But this is only possible if we have an economic complex and we have the Ministry of Health in synchrony with the design of long-lasting public policies. And Franco said that obviously the economic complex is not just strategic, it's fundamental. We cannot have a unified healthcare system that is well structured up to the challenge of offering good healthcare to Brazilian citizens without a policy geared towards this consolidation of the manufacturing complex in Brazil. I think my time is up already, but if you think I should say something else, please let me know. Franco, we cannot hear you. Okay, I'll go on and I'll start speaking. Okay, Franco, along the same lines. He was going to ask you how to make perennial policies. Okay. I would just like to thank for the opportunity. And this FIS is really sensational. And I would like to greet my friend Franco, president of Abimo, and also Marco Nascimento, and that is replacing with great class Dr. Gadelha. Congratulations on your participation. Everything you said was very appropriate. So everything you said was very appropriate. And that are opportunities. And the exposure that we have had in the pandemic all over the world, and in Brazil too, it was no different. We came across and we had to deal with our frailties. One of them, for sure, is superficial, but it's also important. That's something that we didn't say in our past. So there are 50 million users that are part of this, and it is very important. It's fundamental in Brazil. And we had the problem of care in the country, and also health. So, and this is really major. And this is our international dependence. And this is an issue of a matter of national security. So For example, in the airport of Guarulhos, which is the most important airport in Brazil, in its cargoes, they specified health. And then the industry, the national industry and everything. So we know how important Fiocruz is within this process. So it's been many years. So if that was ready, would have been producing and manufacturing many inputs here in Brazil. Because of lack of investments and there is no public policy. And this is the discontinuity of public policies. With some laws for a ministry to stay 4 years in a ministry. So changes minister, the whole team is changed, and it's very difficult to define something in the long term. Why can't we have long-term projects in the area of health? We need that. So this pandemic has showed to us how essential it is to have a healthcare system, but it also showed the frailties in the unified healthcare system, the importance of supplemental health, and it is also essential, and it's a matter of national security. So to mention the ventilators, which a theme that was touched before, but also in terms of predictability. The inequality between the ones that are imported and the ones that are made in Brazil. And this has an impact on Brazilian industry. So it's impossible to do that. So if we need ventilators, we need to open like 3 or 4 new factories. What about the requirements and knowledge that one needs to do to produce with quality? If we had a long-term program or agenda, we wouldn't need to do things overnight. It would be easier. And we need to go and have quality all over the world. But there is a quality. And the financial difficulties are really huge. The difficulty in programming is huge, and this is fatal for the manufacturing industry. It's difficult to do all of this. So what we need to do, we need to have a long-term planning for the government and the focus that these are national security issues. And this has been very clearly demonstrated, and we have a lot of responsibility here. Not just that, and I speak, we oftentimes react. We need to be more proactive. We need to have a permanent public policy to provide stability and stability in our distributors so that we can have safety to everyone, Brazilian citizens. And this is why we need to do it all. The pharmaceutical industry, medication industry, in medical materials industry. They invest 17% in research. So that's why there is ongoing and permanent renewal and innovation. So they invest 4% of a big PIB, and then things happen because they're planned. So in the federal Congress, we need to have a permanent structure, and we're building that, unfortunately, on this term in office. There are many congressmen who know a little bit, and some know a lot about health, for us to propose permanent long-term policies so that there are no surprises. So I had programs of kidney transplant in Rio Grande do Sul, in the interior of Rio Grande do Sul. There was a transplant program. So there was predictability. Why couldn't we have that program for all industries in the manufacturing, for example? Sometimes there's a need and then we can't cater to those needs. And then there's unemployment, it stabilizes, and then there's half a dozen factories. And this is very dangerous. So we have a lot of responsibility, and undoubtedly this is essential, and these issues of the industrial complex have become a matter of national security with our whole industry in terms of equipment. And then we cannot be dependent on situations, and there are other situations. Now, if we wait for things to happen to only then react, we need to be proactive so that we're caught unprepared. That cannot happen. We need to understand that these are issues in an area where we need to have predictability. The hospitals need predictability. We shouldn't be running up and down, improvising solutions. In this great country that has the great, maybe the only one of the few countries that has a national healthcare system, this is an issue, and I have reason to think with all the investments, it is important. Everything is important, and especially to have long-term policies. Tax programs, equality, they are priority. We need to be predictable. The government needs to be predictable. We cannot be caught by surprise at any time. So these are my initial considerations, and these are the most important things I had to say. Marco, we mustn't forget supplemental health. There are 50 million Brazilians that use the supplemental health. And so the two systems are very important and they complement each other. I think that these initial considerations open many possibilities for us to continue. Pedro, I like very much to understand and look at Brazil as a country that has more than 100 million inhabitants to have a universal healthcare system. In the world, before the pandemic, we're the biggest ones. So this gives us power in terms of care, either at SUS or in supplemental health. But in contrast, we have a weak industry. And here are many of the issues you touched on. And this is where you converge, the issues that you mentioned and the issues that Marco puts and that I had mentioned. Look, it's been 20 years that we started having the CIS, so then it became SAIS, which is the health economic complex. And then we understand that we were dealing with more than 10% of the GDP, that we're dealing more than 10% of the formal workforce in the country. So this is an industry that is very powerful economically speaking. And it is a highly innovative industry and with great capacity of attracting funds because it can be an exporting industry in a very significant way. And we go back to the issue. It's been 20 years that we've been building or trying to build these issues, and we were not able, for many different reasons. We weren't. So some people didn't believe, some people believed in it, but didn't advance. Look at the case that we saw in a TV of Butantan factory. I don't know if you saw it. It's a factory that started in PDPs. And so the protocols for technology transfer signed in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, 150 million in investment are stopped, and now our private partner said, bye-bye, I won't stay here anymore. All of this because, according to the press, because the Ministry of Health did not do what they were supposed to do, to use the state purchasing power. Pedro, you are a physician. In 2013, when a similar process was signed for hemodialysis filters, Brazil today has approximately 200,000 patients in chronic kidney replacement. So they need every week 3 sessions of hemodialysis per week. All inputs are imported. If the pandemic had generated pressure on a dialysis system, on renal replacement instead of replacement, we would not have had hemodialysis filters. And then we would have a very complex situation. Because again, we need to use the tools that we have in the Congress for us to start the discussion, not with a ideological, political bias, a bias of health, and as Adib Jateni used to say, a bias for us to overcome technological shortages. So when we were short of ventilators, Brazil had 4 ventilator. We had only 4 ventilator factories. Do you know how many we have today? We have 15 full. This is the biggest industrial reconversion that we have had after the World War II. So industries from every sector helping us with what was needed. Do you know how the Brazilian government responded to everything that was done in urgency? Not even a thank you message. Nothing. Thank you for being able to count on you. Absolutely nothing. So this is what happened. This is the reality. Every day they called us, how are the projects? Do you need with the... And then we needed projects and projects. And this is what the government did. And now I don't need it anyway. So I would like to emphasize, and the Congress is essential. And we did that with the executive power. We need you from the health group in the Congress. You were a driving force that was very important and a channel of permanent communication between the industry and the Congress during the tragedy of the pandemic. And then we are advancing. How are we supposed to do this? Well, Franco? So Marco and Franco, we have created a permanent structure here, and we are trying to build this so that we can provide advice to all congressmen. So there is a need in different segments. But the state is regulating, and they were broke. So there is a segment that is very important in politics in Rio Grande do Sul. But this permanent changing of government ideologies and everything in this complex, it needs to be functional. We need to have a structure that proposes something, and all elements that are part of this major healthcare complex, industries, services, and everything So we need to create public policies and we need to execute. We already have important examples. So we need to address this example just as they do in agriculture. But they needed to draft an environmental code because it is organized. They did many things. They have a perennial structure that doesn't depend on the congressman. It's already defined, it's set. And then what is going to be taken out? And there is an advancement in our representations by unions and associations, getting closer to politics and politicians, because whether you want it or not, all advances in society take place in city, state, and national level legislative bodies. So we didn't have a permanent need. So there are three parliamentary fronts to deal with vaccination in Brazil, because vaccination levels have been going down in Brazil. And during the pandemic, it has improved a little bit, but not gone to ideal levels. And then we have lung diseases, and we have many groups of congressmen working together to address health issues for them to use it. So we need to create rules.
Yeah, you know, people is Brazil's like this. So you have people and medical people. It can't be like that. No, it has to be different. We have two generations lost in Brazil. People that joined the market with a diploma, but not skilled to carry out their activities. So it cannot be like this. It's a large country. Brazil has a spectacular number of people that have to do this. So we have to encourage the industry, trade, research and development. So this has to be viewed all over the world. So we have national issues as well. So we need to do this. So we have systems. We have to bring our governors to understand, and they avoid certain things. Well, a new vaccine, it's important to avoid that the person does these things. The vaccine is something accounted for, so it protects lives. So that's an example. So certain drugs do not follow protocols. In addition to inserting citizens to normal life, they have several things that are avoided, several issues. Very good, Pedro. But this challenge of our institute is something we're going to pursue. This institute that is a complex in health, yeah, we're going to pursue it. So we have to follow that. Yeah, agree. Yeah, let's discuss it together. Marco, what are your final remarks? Would you like to? We have 5 minutes. Sure. To me, it has been a great surprise to listen to this proposal of having something more permanent and supporting representatives. I think this goes meets the avoiding the loss of, so that we don't have to reinvent things. We have the initiatives, they exist. I keep this image of our making experiments, things do not work out as they will when they are starting. It's a burden of being pioneer, expansion plan of radiotherapy. They're very valuable ideas, and many times we have problems, as they will happen. But we have this behavior systemic of throwing the project out when things work out. More permanent, that remind us of things that we have to retain the experiences that have advanced. I think this is fundamental. I think certain things draw my attention. How much society is not aware of the tools that are used, the expansion plan of radiotherapy. We have the greatest purchase of devices. We managed to install the first plan outside the main axis or the main areas of Sweden, US, using a tool using offset. And we had they made an aircraft, so we had a linear accelerator, so people could be aware of. So to have society participating, know that health can go beyond the assurance of citizens, the health, that it's a tool, development tool for the country as a whole. It's very important. Very nice. I'm going to make my final remarks, and I will let Pedro close. Just bringing some information to tell you how schizophrenic the system is. Look, mentioned the great gigantic competition that we had of linear accelerators. He commented that we brought through a mechanism of offset, a US plant to Brazil. All of this correct. This plant shut its doors a few days ago. You know why? Because they did not give tax isonomy. So they said the following: I cannot produce and sell in Brazil. It's more expensive than bringing it from the US. If I make it there, I don't pay taxes, and in Brazil I do. They shut their doors. So they had a bunker, and this is a schizophrenic model that we still have, and it's not one person that is guilty. It's a model that is not designed, not structured with this organism of permanent access of healthcare paid for the parliament may be. It's an excellent alternative, as you well put it. We're all passengers. So I managed to keep this memory. Thank you very much, Marco, Pedro, for your time, dedication of yours, for the lessons learned. Pedro, please make your final remarks so we can proceed to the closing. Just briefly, you gave the final touch. That's it. Not only have they shut their doors, but also they give an example that you cannot come to Brazil. It's to end with our industry. So, yeah, this is the problem, the tax system in Brazil. So it's impossible to make investments. So those who are here are going to go bankrupt, or they just leave. So this is, as I say, many. And this is where we have to be proactive and not reactive. That's why the concern of creating public policies of long-term. And so if I cannot do something, you can actually have it through parliament. So several things that have to be done, the executive, so we accept or not, and then we have to see them. And then we can, there's no use fighting with the right and left. So if you're here, you're going to good their own way. So the ability of proving projects or appeals, it doesn't matter. We have to have support from everyone. So, and we have to benefit the population. This is the reason of this meeting, So we had a lot of conversation. I hope I have contributed in this moment through conversation and understanding we can get to this common denominator to support ministers, etc. We can even make ministers. I just wanted to say that this case of the offset of the accelerators would be an excellent example of not throwing the whole project out because of something that didn't work out later. This is the point. Thank you very much. People are telling me that the time is up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marco. Thank you. Bye.